Hey guys, it's Destiny, and today we're going to be talking about characters I highly recommend for endgame investment and my reasoning for it. I will also discuss how I feel about Luocha, Kafka, and Blade, just as a way to see how I feel about them regarding endgame, if I feel like they'll change the meta per se, and so on. Without further ado though, let's get straight into it. As you can see, I've been suffering through Memory of Chaos, and enemies love to target my 9,000 secret taunt Tingyun for some odd reason. And I don't have max stars in Memory of Chaos. However, I've been testing out a good amount of characters from Memory of Chaos just to see how they fare. And I've noticed I've come to use characters, or specific characters rather, really often when it comes to Memory of Chaos, and I'll also be getting into that as well. One side note I like to mention real quick though is I'm not going to go heavily into DPS characters as they're pretty situational, such as if a character is weak to ice and not physical, then a character like Yingqing would be better in that scenario than a character like Sushang, and vice versa. Unless, of course, you have a certain Stellaron Hunter on your team, then it kind of doesn't matter, but let's just assume that you don't have her for either of your teams in this case, then what I say would still stand. With that out of the way though, let's get into my recommendations. For my first recommendation, I highly recommend March 7th. If you have Eidolons on her, even better. But as you can see, my March 7th is only level 62. This is roughly her defense. I'm sure this can be much higher with more investment, but I've noticed that my March 7th has just been really good for just basically allowing my teammates to have way more survivability. And even though I have Gepard, as you can see, here's Gepard's defense, I actually use Gepard and March 7th. I don't like exclude one or the other. I have found that both of them in Memory of Chaos is pretty good. And I know there are teams out there that don't necessarily need sustain in Memory of Chaos, but I personally do like sustain myself. So March 7th has just been an incredible option. Eidolons, of course, make her way better. However, you don't need them because the main thing I like about March 7th is her skill, due to the fact that you get a really beefy shield. Like, her shields are really, really good. And it also allows for more taunt on your ally when she has the shield on them, which allows March 7th to do her follow-up attacks, which is always nice. And also March 7th's Trace allows her to remove a debuff from an ally as well, so she has cleansing. So against an enemy like Kafka, she's really good. If your ally just has a bunch of debuffs on them, March 7th is just incredible for dealing with these types of enemies. And I know other characters have cleanse as well, but the mixture of cleanse and shields and all of that good stuff makes March 7th an incredible character to invest into. I highly recommend it. Next up, we have Tingyun. My Tingyun is kind of not the best, however, the results she gives me are pretty good. Once again, she has a secret taunt value, I guess, of 9,000 because she loves to get targeted. I'm not really sure why that happens, but regardless, Tingyun is really good because of her skill kit, and if you get Eidolons once again, even better. If you don't though, she's still really good, as her skill can increase your ally's attack. She also increases your lightning damage, so she's really good with a character like Jing Yuan. And then of course, Tingyun herself will be able to do more damage dependent on the attack of that ally. So in a way, she's buffing an ally, and she's also able to buff herself depending on which ally she buffs. Her ultimate is also very, very good, as it regenerates 50 energy for an ally and increases that ally's damage by a percentage for 2 turns. Her ultimate is really strong. This is overall just a really good skill kit, and she's really good especially if you are looking into hyper carry teams or you have a lightning DPS character, as she can make that lightning DPS character have quite a lot of potential overall. So I would highly recommend, if you do have Tingyun, definitely look into investing into her. Now we have Pela. Pela is also incredibly good, and I would still recommend to build Pela even if you have Silverwolf. I still need to work a bit more on my Pela, and she just flew off the screen, but you know, she's going through it. It's okay. But Pela is really good because she's able to remove a buff from an enemy, which can be pretty nice. And her ultimate also has a 100% base chance to inflict exposed onto enemies. And when enemies are exposed, their defense is reduced for 2 turns. So this is really good because Pela is able to effectively reduce defenses of enemies, and if you actually use her and Silverwolf together, they can actually do this together. So Silverwolf can reduce defenses through her ultimate and her bugs, and Pela can also reduce defense further through her ultimate. They count as separate debuffs. So this is really good because you can actually look into Pela and Silverwolf possibly on the same team, especially if you have a character like, let's say, Yang Qing on the team, you have a character like Zila. This could be an amazing combo, and overall, Pela's just really strong in her debuffing capabilities. And if you don't have Silverwolf, I would also recommend definitely look into Pela if you do have one. Now we have Natasha. I don't heavily use Natasha because I typically use March, Bailu, and Gepard instead, but of course I know not everybody has those characters. But Natasha's pretty good as well when it comes to just being able to heal your team, and she's also able to cleanse allies. So that's always a nice thing because cleansing is pretty good in this game, as removing debuffs can definitely come in handy, especially once again against enemies like Kafka. So I definitely recommend Natasha. Now, I don't personally have him built up, but I do think Sampo, or sometimes referred to as our favorite shampoo and conditioner, I think he will be really, really good once his time comes. And by this, I mean another certain Stellaron hunter, Kafka. Once we get her, I feel like Sampo will be incredible on a team comp like that, because Sampo is heavily based on damage over time, which is also referred to as DOT. The reason why Sampo is really good is because he's able to, basically when he attacks an enemy with his skill, he will do 5 attacks. As you see here, he does the initial attack and then he does 4 extra attacks. And what's really cool is that basically Sampo has a chance to inflict wind shear every single time he attacks an enemy. As you see here, his attacks have a 65 base chance to inflict wind shear for 3 turns, which is already really good. And overall, he's just able to inflict a lot of DOT on enemies. His ultimate also increases the DOT taken by enemies, which him and Kafka can both take advantage of. So personally, I think Sampo will be really good once we get a character like Kafka, and I'm about to also explain Kafka in a little bit. Additionally, if you are enjoying the video and want to become part of the Loomies community, make sure to subscribe, and now let's carry on. Now I'm going to be talking about Kafka, Luocha, and Blade. I'm going to begin though with Kafka. So Kafka is a character who revolves around DOT, which once again is damage over time. The most notable thing about her is that her skill allows her to detonate DOT. So if I were to give an example of what this means, and when she uses her skill, she does her normal damage to her skill, but she also has a secondary effect where essentially she blows up the DOTs. So if you were to think, I guess, like a landmine, you have the DOTs. And then Kafka comes in and she just blows it all up with her skill alongside the damage she does initially. That's a way to think about it. She detonates DOT. Typically, enemies take DOT when it is their turn. They get hit with it, and then it either goes on for numerous turns, depending on how much DOT is on the enemy, or it just stops there. So Kafka, every time she uses skill, she'll be able to detonate this and basically allow for quite a lot of damage, depending, of course, how the scaling is when she's here, which once she is here, I will test this, of course, but I still think she'll be really, really powerful, especially with that detonation. Now, when it comes to Luocha, I think he'll be an incredible healer. I already have really high hopes for him. I can't wait to pull him next week and get to showcase him and make my guide and all that good stuff. But I think Luocha will be really good because he's able to cleanse allies, which, as I said, is really useful. Once again, if you get inflicted with a really bad debuff, you could just get rid of it, which is awesome. Luocha also has an emergency heal. Once an ally's HP threshold is below a certain percentage, he'll be able to emergency heal them every few turns, so this is really good. Another cool thing about him is that his ultimate is AoE, and what his ultimate allows him to do is remove a buff from the enemy, which is similar to what Pela can do, but now there is an AoE form that you can do, which I think overall is really strong as well. So Luocha just has a lot of things in his kit, which makes his utility like through the roof. I think his utility is amazing, and I personally think endgame wise, he'll be really good for helping your team have sustain, and he's going to be really good for utility purposes as a teammate on your team. So once again, also with Luocha, really high hopes. I think this character will be awesome. Now for Blade, I think Blade will be really strong. I don't personally think Blade will necessarily shift the meta, if you will, I think with Blade, you'll mainly just have to really focus on having sustains that can keep Blade alive, because Blade is a character who sacrifices his health to become stronger. Not too sure about all the details regarding Blade, but that is the premise of Blade, which isn't necessarily a bad thing because he can probably get really strong as a result and probably do a lot of damage, which I personally think he will do a lot of damage, but of course we have to wait and see. But I still think Blade will be really good. I just don't think he'll be per se meta shifting. I think you'll still want to use your sustains, if anything, and just have a heavy focus on making sure Blade is well and good. I think though he'll be able to do pretty well, and I of course will be testing all 3 of these 5 stars. I think all of them will be honestly good picks, and they will probably have certain team comps they work the best in, as most characters do, but we'll just have to wait and see. Now, when we get into characters like Gepard and Bailu, I think both these characters are really good, just really good sustain overall. And when you have a character like Silverwolf or Welt, as you see, Welt is really good at making sure the enemy just doesn't have a turn. He's really good at slowing down enemies, and overall, I've seen he has pretty good damaging capabilities as well from certain people's builds I've seen. So Welt overall is pretty good 5-star. So is Silverwolf, she inflicts bugs, she does weakness implantation, and so on. Silverwolf is an incredible character as well. Bronya, of course, incredible supportive character. She's able to advance your turn forward, she's able to buff your crits. She's overall really strong. Lastly, I want to discuss MC. MC is pretty good, and I would actually recommend investing into them, especially because we have seen so far that MC will be able to get the other elements. So if you are missing a really strong character from an element, it is likely that MC may be able to fill that role. Fire MC is pretty good as well for modes like MOC. I just personally prefer Gepard and Bailu, just that's my personal preference. And of course, Fire MC is a good option as well. And those are the characters I highly recommend for investment purposes. Of course, in the comments down below, what characters have you guys invested into and what characters have you seen a lot of success in? Of course, I didn't talk about every character in the game in this video. All of them have their roles and all of them have really good benefits to them, regardless of who you're looking at. So I just want to know, how do you guys build your characters? Which ones do you feel like have done a really good amount of performance for your account, and so on? I just want to know these things. And also, what is your favorite video game series? Like, out of all of them that exist, what is your favorite series? For me, it would probably be Pokemon. I just personally love Pokemon. It's just so much fun to play the games and a lot of nostalgia behind it, so I just love it. I know I'm nerding out here, but Pokemon is awesome. And of course, I hope all of you did enjoy this video. If you did, consider subscribing, leave a like to support the video. Once again, comment down below just your builds, what characters you really like in the game, and make sure, of course, at the end of the day, play the characters you want. If I listed none of your favorite characters in this video, it's a-okay. Build the character you like. All these characters have really good roles. They're able to do something for your team comps, and I don't think any one character is per se bad in this game. So just build who you want at the end of the day and have fun, because that's the point of the game. I just thought I'd share my thoughts on what characters I found the most success in, and of course, I hope all of you have a nice one. Peace.